Robbins is going to see his mother at this nursing home, Morrison Lodge in Perth. Jean Robbins has lived here for the past 10 years. In 2016, Ed was worried about unexplained bruising on her arms and legs.
That's your favourite one, isn't it? You give him a cuddle? Mum said to my sister, you know, look, they're so rough, it feels like they're ripping my skin off. And she actually had skin tears, and you could see the handprints. So she went and asked them, and they said, oh, she seems to be falling out of bed a lot. And we kind of thought, oh, well, that's probably because she thinks that she wants to go to the toilet or whatever, you know? So she'd just try and get out of bed. So I said, well, look, so make life easy, why don't we just put a camera in, you know, a little camera, clock camera, and we'll just see what's happening.
3 weeks after putting the hidden camera in, Ed Robbins discovered what was causing the bruises.
And we noticed that she's trying to get out of bed rather than falling out of bed.
Jean Robbins had recently broken her leg and was bedridden, but with the onset of dementia, she's forgotten she can't walk. The footage shows the 92-year-old repeatedly calling for help. It takes 20 minutes for staff to put her back to bed.
So they've come in and they're putting her back in the bed, and they're picking her up by the arms. So you can see the hand bruising from her being picked up, where they're supposed to use a hoist to pick up any resident off the ground if they're on the ground. That wasn't happening.
On another occasion, the carers are using a hoist, but because Jean isn't used to it, she's unsure what to do.
So Mum's hanging on for dear life onto those handles, and you can see by her knuckles they're white, so she squeezes because she's scared, and they're not relaxing her, you know what I mean? Yeah, these people's a carer, and they're talking to a 92-year-old woman. Don't give us a hard time. Doesn't make any sense, does it?
These carers think it's funny when Jean Robbins lashes out after one of them grabs her sore leg.
Shocked, disgusted, upset. You could see her face that she was mad at them for laughing at her, you know. There was no respect. And we just noticed more and more where, you know, they were abusing them, and that's what I call it, as abuse.
Ed Robbins discovered the most disturbing treatment happened at night when his mother was being put to bed.
And then even in one part, Mum has a teddy, and they threw the teddy in her face. Mum's trying to defend herself there, putting her arm up, pushing against her because she's being grabbed.
The more Ed Robbins watched, the angrier he became.
We saw them, dragging Mum on the ground. She's grabbed hold of the woman's arm because she thought she's going to slip. And you can see the carer pull her arm away. And Mum was in pain, obviously, putting her hands up to protect herself. And they're throwing her leg in. And the thing was that the leg that had been pinned is the one that they're throwing in. She's crying, so they've thrown the pillow over her face to shut her up or to block out the noise or whatever. Putting a pillow over an aged person's head, what is she thinking? What's Mum thinking? Disgusted, angry. A grown man like me, upset. So, and then having to show the rest of the family. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Ed Robbins took the footage to Morrison Lodge, who called Perth Police. Carers Louis Ando Freeman and Glenda Lua were charged with a total of 12 counts of assault. The case went to court in March this year.
So when it went to there, we thought, well, it's going to happen. We're finally going to get it off. Even the police officers that were involved, they said this will be it. It'll be all cleared up. And then it all turned to crap.
The carers were acquitted of all charges. The magistrate found the carers were run off their feet, and Gene Robbins was often violent and abusive towards staff. He found the degree of force used was reasonable.
Perhaps if I were to give a quick example, the example that I give is the placing of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old into a car seat and trying to get their seatbelt done up. If that child is compliant, then some force is needed, but not much. If the child is resisting, then more force is needed. If the child is throwing a complete tantrum, then obviously extra force is needed to achieve what has to be achieved.
She's a grown woman, a 2-year-old, chucking a tantrum. A child will chuck a tantrum too if they're being squeezed or pinched or abused at getting into the bed. How can 2 or 3-year-old?
What would you call it if it wasn't assault?
What would you call it? Okay, abuse. She was being abused. There's different types of abuse. She was being physically abused in our eyes and from what we were told by the police.
The magistrate awarded costs to the 2 carers who had been sacked.
They think that we are a bad person, but in this situation, we are the victim here, and terminating us at work. That's not fair because we work hard. We care for all the people.
After the regulator, the Australian Aged Care Quality Agency, saw the hidden footage, it sanctioned the home and stopped government funding for new residents for 3 months. Since then, the home's 100% accreditation rating has been restored. Today, people looking at reports on the agency website will find no information about what occurred there.
Waiting for the others to finish their breakfast.
Gene Robbins remains at Morrison Lodge with the camera in place.
There should be cameras in every room as far as I'm concerned, so that us as families can review things. It'd even work for the nursing homes, to see what's happening after hours.
Oh, that one's tasty for us.
I don't think many Australians know what goes on treating the elderly. Something like this, hopefully, people will realise and start believing their parents in aged care institutions that something is going on, and not just say, oh, it's dementia. Your mum's got dementia. And look at it further. You know what I mean?
At the trial, carer Lewis Ando Freeman said the only formal training she'd had was a 6-week course, and that she had 5 minutes to get each resident to bed at night. Global Care Group told Four Corners it does not tolerate abuse, and there is no time limit to prepare residents for bed. Staff who contacted the ABC identified poor training as one factor in what the industry calls rough handling.
Rough handling to me can be as simple as rushing a resident. If you've got a resident that's got dementia and isn't understanding that you're, undressing them to give them a shower, you can't just be ripping their clothes off here, there and everywhere. They resist, they'll fight you. And it's rough.
I always wished that there was, when they employed people, they would not just look to see if they've got the certificate, but would actually look to see how do they speak to residents, how they speak to carers, what's their grasp of English like.
There were some people that were clearly not suited to working in a care capacity. They were lacking in empathy and seemed unable to imagine what it would be like to be in the situation of a dependent, frail person.
Steve Wood is a former police officer who worked in aged care complaints and compliance during a decade with the Federal Department of Health. Recently retired, he's speaking out now because he believes aged care providers are being protected instead of the elderly residents in their care.
Being in the compliance team, we were that thin line of public servants who actually stood up for residents to make sure that providers did the right thing. There seems to be this philosophy now, or this culture of actually pandering to or looking after providers. So we hasten much more slowly to take action against providers, and we give them far more scope to fix things, which perhaps should be fixed earlier.
Steve Wood is highly critical of the Quality Agency's accreditation system, which last year gave 95% of nursing homes a perfect score.
I think that's unrealistic. I think if you believe that that is how our aged care system is operating at the moment, I think that's naive. I don't think it's an accurate reflection of how the industry is. There must be more providers and services out there who are not meeting the standards and who are simply slipping through the gaps in the system.
And why are they allowed to slip through the gaps?
Because the agency only does the one unannounced visit a year. The gaps between those visits can be quite frequent. The complaints people are no longer visiting services like they used to. It's very frustrating for members of the public.
Helen Hackett spent 8 months searching for the truth about the death of her father, Xenophon Chimarios.
He was born in the island of Corfu in Greece. Dad thought it would be a good idea for us to come to Australia and give his family a better future.
He was a resident at this Sydney nursing home in Bexley, owned by Bupa, one of Australia's biggest private aged care providers, which also had a 100% accreditation rating from the Quality Agency. In the early hours of April 8, 2016, a nurse rang Helen Hackett to say her father had died.
Well, I had seen Dad about three days before, and he seemed to be fine. My stepmother had seen him the day before that, and we thought that he was okay. I mean, he was very sick, but we didn't expect him to die.
He was old and he did have a number of complications and so on. So what did you find so difficult about
getting that phone call?
The problem was that we were told that the ambulance was called at 12:35 and that the ambulance was cancelled at 1:30. So I couldn't understand how that was happening. Why didn't the ambulance come within a few minutes, 10 minutes at the most, and take Dad to the hospital?
Helen Hackett asked Bupa for more details and was told that the registered nurse felt she did everything possible to care for your father, that he did not seem distressed at all, and that 2 nurses had kept a real close supervision on Xenophon, not leaving his side unless they were attending to other residents.
Well, I could have really gone away and accepted their comment that my dad died peacefully. I was concerned that there was no one with him. I was concerned that he wasn't given any care at the end. And I wanted to know what really happened. What happened?
Helen Hackett requested a recording of the call made to the New South Wales ambulance. She was shocked by what she heard.
Good morning, ambulance.
Oh, hi, Sister Bupa Bexley. I need an ambulance transfer, please.
To the emergency department?
No. I'm not on the emergency line, am I? No.
I heard the nurse talking to the ambulance dispatcher. It was fairly... she wasn't in any great rush, or she wasn't in any concern of Dad's situation. I could hear my father in the background moaning, and she actually said she wasn't trying to get... She didn't really want an ambulance straight away. She wanted an ambulance within 1 to 2 hours.
What's the phone number you're calling from, please?
9567. What's the rest of the phone number? 95, sorry. Casual staff in.
Okay, so we're going from that residence?
Yes.
And which hospital are we going
St George Hospital, please.
You can hear her father in the background.
Based on the patient's condition, in what time frame would you like?
1, 2 hours, please.
Within 2 hours, is that okay?
Yes, within 2 hours.
Helen Hackett's father was found dead 1 hour and 20 minutes after the phone call.
I don't know why she acted in the way she did. The ambulance service told me that all ambulances were available on that particular night.
Helen Hackett was so appalled, she called aged care complaints and spoke to an officer there.
She didn't think it was important for her to listen to the tape, and I sort of convinced her that it was important, and I sent it to her. Her comment was, "Will an apology do?" And I said, "No, an apology will not do. You have to do your job, and you have to find out what happened and make sure that this doesn't happen again."
6 months later, Aged Care Complaints responded with its report. Helen Hackett's father had been alone for more than an hour before he died.
The fact is that the right things hadn't been done, were not done for him at his hour of need. These were really just total lies.
Aged Care Complaints closed the case. It did not visit Bupa Bexley during its investigation, nor refer its report to the Quality Agency. The nursing home retains its 100% accreditation rating. Bupa took the nurse off night duty and retrained staff in how to take vital signs. Bupa told Four Corners that in its initial response, serious errors of judgment were made, and it was sincerely sorry for the inadequate care.
To simply say that staff members have been educated and this won't happen again doesn't give the family of the deceased any comfort at all, because it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
I believe there are a lot of incidents like this that we don't know about. Families do not have a way of finding out the truth. You know, he was a loving man. He cared for his family. He worked hard all his life, and he didn't deserve this ending. And The worst thing, I suppose, is that he died alone and there was no one there for him.
At this Melbourne meeting in June, families and advocates came together to share their stories about shocking treatment in aged care.
I don't care who you are and I don't care what your problem is. There is nothing more degrading or humiliating to see someone who can't care for themselves in soiled nappy, caked on faeces, on her legs, in the nappy, on the walker and on herself. An animal doesn't get that disgusting disregard.
These people are angry about the aged care complaint system, which they say is useless.
It took me 4 days to tell my father that my 90-year-old father, that his wife had been bashed around the head, and I had no contact from the complaints team.
They vent their frustration at complaints officers seated at the back of the room.
How many were made accountable, and what was the most serious issue that you found that they were actually penalised for? Give me an example of how you penalised one of these companies.
In the past 2 years, complaints have increased by almost 50%, yet officers rarely go on site to investigate.
Out of something like 4,700 complaints in 2016-2017, the annual report says that the officers made 50 site visits. Have I misinterpreted the reading of that?
That's correct. What are you doing there? Not every complaint requires a site visit.
When Steve Wood worked in the department a decade ago, there were over 3,000 visits in a year.
I'm really disappointed that we think so little of our residents that the Commissioner's Office send out officers on only 50 visits from the thousands of complaints that they've had. You cannot get that feeling for what an aged care service is doing over the phone. And you can't get that feeling by sending an email to the provider saying, we've had a complaint about A, B and C. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, I think what they do is they look at the severity of each incident, and those that are of the higher order is where I suspect they visit a site physically.
But that is a very, very small percentage,
but many of the issues, though, can be dealt with through discussions with telephone, correspondence.
You think that's adequate?
Well, that's a judgment that they make, and if people are happy with those outcomes and write and indicate that they're satisfied that the resolution that they were seeking has been met, then I'm not going to challenge that style. One of the fundamental things that is important to all of us...
Aged Care Minister Ken Wyatt recently announced a new commission to improve complaint investigations and regulate new standards. Since July 1, nursing homes are no longer told the date of their accreditation inspection. That reform is to ensure nursing homes do not falsify conditions when accreditation occurs once every 3 years, something staff say has been a common practice.
Accreditation was a farce because they always got notification. From 2 weeks to a month's notification, staffing levels were increased. The food on the day or the couple of days they were there was wonderful. Activities were increased to a much higher level.
You'd need to go and make sure that all the paperwork was up to date, so that all the showering charts, the bowel charts, the nutrition charts, the personal care charts, so just quickly tick, 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 make sure that it was all ticked.
They don't see, they're not looking. They're just coming in and they're checking the things in the system, and it's almost like if they can tick their box, they're out. They're not asking the right questions. They're not, and staff aren't comfortable to be able to go to accreditation and say, look, this is actually what's going on, for fear of repercussion, for fear of losing their job.
We knew when the accreditation team were going to be coming, so for 3 months prior to that, we had somebody basically filling in all the gaps, like I say, making up blood sugars, backdating wound dressings that hadn't been done. We were told if there were any gaps just to do a squiggle so that it looked like a signature, so that it looked like it had been given without any concern whether that had been given or not.
And did you have a problem with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think all the staff did.
Despite the reforms, Steve Wood says until the agency makes public the failures that occur in nursing homes, families will remain in the dark.
I think it's a bit of an irony that you can sit on the internet and book yourself a hotel or a car or a flight and you can compare very easily. But in aged care, it's not so easy, not so easy at all. Because what's published on the agency's website is so restricted, you don't get a true feel for how that service is operating.
Alana Freeman is still fighting for justice over her mother's death in 2016.
I was asked once, how would you feel if your mother had just died of a heart attack? And I said, I would have been upset, I would have been grieving, but that's normal and natural. I said, the way my mother has died is not normal, it is not natural.
In July 2016, June Freeman went to Presbyterian Aged Care Westcott in Stockton, New South Wales. She needed help managing her diabetes, but was otherwise independent. Just 3 days in, the 87-year-old had a bad fall. Despite her pain and pleadings from her daughter, she wasn't sent to hospital until she had another fall a week later.
So then I went to the Mater Hospital, and that's when they did all the investigations, and turned out that she had a fractured T12 vertebra that she'd been sitting on for 8 days.
And how much pain had she been in when you saw her?
Excruciating. Yeah, absolutely excruciating pain. I was angry, frustrated, felt very helpless.
When June Freeman returned to the home, she was unable to walk and eventually developed pressure wounds, though no one told the family.
She would be very uncomfortable and be, saying her bottom was sore all the time. We thought it was the catheter, but it turned out to be a pressure sore. She had them on her heels, her ankles, her elbows, and a large one on her bottom.
And when did you find out how bad those pressure sores were?
When I saw the medical notes after she died. We found out how bad they were. I saw the photos of them, and nothing was said to me when she was in there. And they were that bad that she should have been in hospital having treatment for them. They were infected and oozing as well.
June Freeman died of sepsis just 3.5 months after she first went to the nursing home. The family went to aged care complaints. 10 months later, it reported that the home didn't regularly liaise with the GP, had not sought a wound specialist review, and had left wound care to be mainly completed by carers.
The Aged Care Complaints Commission found that it was untrained carers doing mum's wound care.
And how do you feel about that?
Very angry now. Again, if I'd have known that at the time, I would have done more about it. I think I would have just taken mum somehow to the hospital myself.
Aged Care Complaints closed the case. It did not visit the nursing home for its investigation, nor refer its report to the Quality Agency. 3 months later, the regulator extended the home's accreditation by an extra 9 months for sustained compliance with the standards. It still has its 100% score.
Since then, I've looked up what happens in the UK and the US, and there are sites there where you can find out any complaints. There's nothing in Australia for that. And I don't understand it. If they can do it elsewhere, what's so hard about doing it here?
June Freeman's family is suing Presbyterian Aged Care for professional negligence.
It's the only way in Australia to have these places accountable is through litigation. They can't be prosecuted. They just seem to be a law unto themselves, and they need to be named and shamed, and they need to be hit in the hip pocket. And if more people would do this, then they might think twice about how they look after people.
Presbyterian Aged Care apologised to the family.
Generous, kind, loving, wonderful wife, brilliant mother. She always said when we were growing up that she said, I never want to end up like these people in the nursing homes, just a vegetable and in those chairs, and that's what she was.
Libby Bryce knows just how hard it is to get to the truth about what goes on behind closed doors.
Jamie, hello!
Jamie Thean has shared that experience.
Sorry to hear about your mum. Thanks, hon. Come on through. Have you had some lunch?
Their mothers, Mary Thean and Helen Ford, both lived at the Poplars on Sydney's North Shore, owned by Estia, one of Australia's biggest publicly listed aged care companies.
The Poplars was magnificent. It was fairly new. I think it was only a couple of years old. But it was very palatial. It's not cheap. The RAD was $750,000. And I think I was paying about $2,000 a month for accommodation, etc.
They thought that price would guarantee good care, but soon noticed something was not right with their mothers.
Well, Mum had bruises and bruises on her wrists and black eyes, and whenever I said something to the staff, they said she had had a fall. But she just wasn't right. She wasn't happy. She wasn't okay. She just, as I said, there's a look of fear in her eyes.
The only time I got a really bad feeling about my mum, and this was probably 18 months after she'd been in the dementia ward, was when I went to visit her one night with a friend, and she was clearly in a terrible state. She was in her room. She looked like a trapped animal. Her eyes were bloodshot. She was swearing, which my mother never did. She was trying to bite me, scratch me, saying, "Don't move, don't move." This wasn't dementia. This was clearly a terrified old lady.
Staff were also concerned. On August 22nd last year, one of them put a hidden camera in one of the rooms of the dementia unit. The room belonged to an 85-year-old woman with dementia whose identity is protected. Within hours of putting the camera in place, this is what it captured. A warning. The footage is very confronting to watch and hear.
Yeah.
Care worker Dana Gray had been working at the Poplars for nearly 4 years. It looks like it's over when Dana Gray takes the rubbish bag, but it's not. The staff member who had installed the camera took the footage to management, who went to the police. The woman in the video was not the only victim. An internal investigation revealed the mothers of Jamie Thean and Libby Bryce had also been abused.
I found out that she'd been abused because Marianne rang me here. One Friday night, I'm the chief nurse at Estia. I just want you to know that unfortunately your mother has been the victim of abuse at the Poplars. We have notified the Department of Health, the police. The person's been dismissed.
I didn't take it too well. Shocked, disappointed. Yeah, I was just, these things don't happen to, I couldn't believe it was happening to me. Also, yeah, I saw a look of fear in my mum's face from the, like, I thought it was part of the dementia, but it was actually, she was being abused and she was scared.
The comments that she would make to me, with hindsight, I now see she was being tormented and was very, very frightened. Things like, can you hide me, or can you take me home, or I can't talk to you long because I'll be in trouble.
Estia invited Jamie Thean and Libby Bryce to 2 meetings at the Poplars for families with relatives in the dementia unit.
Look, my feeling that came out of all the meetings was it was purely a formality. There was never any sense of deep regret, compassion, sympathy for the families, let alone the loved ones that had been abused. It was pretty well, it's past. Nothing we can do about the past. We can move on, and this is what we're doing.
Well, we weren't getting the full story. So we were just told that our loved ones were being abused, and they weren't telling us the truth. And when I pushed for them to tell me more, they didn't tell me anymore.
Unhappy with Estia's response, Libby Bryce went to aged care complaints and discovered the awful truth. The report revealed that a year before the hidden camera was put in place, staff had witnessed Dana Gray abuse other residents, including Libby Bryce's mother, but had failed to report the incidents as abuse.
It's unbelievable, really. Quite unbelievable. Clearly totally lacking in their care of duty. Really fell down terribly, terribly badly because the staff didn't feel it was necessary or were too frightened or uncomfortable to report it. So, terrible.
It needs to be really, looked into because dementia patients, elderly, they're like children. If this was happening to our children, we would be in there and we would be fixing it and solving it. But somehow the elderly get neglected.
We told Minister Ken Wyatt about SDS staff's failure to report the abuse.
Shouldn't there be some consequences for the nursing home?
Well, when I have that reach my desk, or if it's been referred to the quality agency will deal with it, because there are expectations within the standards. And let me tell you, each time the quality agency is involved, they do take their role seriously.
The quality agency did visit the Poplars 7 weeks after the shocking footage emerged. Neither it nor the Aged Care Complaints Commission took any action. The Poplars still has its 100% accreditation rating, and there is no mention of the assault on the agency's website. Dana Gray was convicted of assault and sentenced to 17 months home detention, with a non-parole period of 6 months. Magistrate Robin Dennis called the abuse cruel, humiliating and violent.
Anyone in the community who has a parent or a loved one who is in an aged care facility would be considerably alarmed. What happened is really everyone's worst nightmare.
During a decade at the Department of Health, Steve Wood shut down substandard aged care homes. He says now it's the entire complaints and regulatory system which is failing.
I think we've had a lot of inquiries over the last 10 years or so into aged care, and there's always some sort of media furore. Something happens and something changes, and we'll change the name, we'll rebadge, we'll rebrand, we'll bring in some new people, but ultimately things go back to how they were.
These families endured the abuse and premature deaths of their loved ones, victims of a system which failed our most vulnerable. There's no penalty, no justice, and no accountability, leaving them asking, who cares?